Academic conferences across the galaxy share certain universal truths. The coffee is terrible, the presentations run long, and someone always asks a question that makes everyone wish they'd stayed home. The Xenobiology Institute's annual symposium on comparative predator studies had elevated these traditions to an art form, gathering the most pompous minds from 17 different star systems to debate classifications that would make a tax accountant weep. Professor Zekthara adjusted her ceremonial speaking tendrils as she surveyed the amphitheater, carved from crystalline singing stone. The acoustics were perfect, which meant every condescending chuckle and academic throat-clearing would echo with crystal clarity. 300 of the galaxy's most distinguished xenobiologists had gathered on the neutral research station orbiting Kepler 442b, each convinced their particular expertise in predatory behavior made them slightly superior to their colleagues. The Vorthan delegation had claimed the prime seating near the front, their chitinous frames clicking softly as they exchanged what passed for pleasantries in their species. Behind them, the ethereal Luminians floated in their containment bubbles, occasionally pulsing with colors that roughly translated to scholarly disdain. The Gekanid researchers had arranged themselves in their traditional hierarchy circle, while the cybernetic Nixari representatives sat in perfect geometric formation, their optical sensors whirring with mechanical precision. And then there was the human. The lone representative from Sol 3 sat in the back row, practically invisible among the exotic physiologies surrounding her. Earth had only recently been granted observer status in the Galactic Academic Consortium, a diplomatic courtesy extended mostly to avoid the paperwork of formally rejecting their application. The human exchange student appeared to be in her mid-20s by Terran standards, with the unremarkable bipedal frame and bilateral symmetry that marked her species as evolutionary afterthoughts. Dr. Velinar, the symposium coordinator, had been particularly vocal about the human's presence during the pre-conference briefings. Earth's inclusion in the program struck him as charity work at best, academic tourism at worst. Their homeworld barely qualified as a Class M environment, and their species had achieved interstellar travel through what could charitably be described as controlled explosions and aggressive wishful thinking. The human had introduced herself simply as the Terran Observer during registration, declining to provide the elaborate titles and institutional affiliations that typically accompanied such gatherings. She carried a primitive data pad and wore clothing that looked suspiciously like it had been purchased from whatever passed for a department store on her backwater planet. Her presence was tolerated the way sophisticated dinner parties tolerate the neighbor's awkward cousin. Professor Zekthara activated the amphitheater's holographic display system, filling the air above the audience with swirling galaxies and star charts. The presentation materials had been prepared by the Institute's finest researchers, cross-referenced through 17 different academic databases and peer-reviewed by colleagues whose opinions mattered. This was serious science, the kind that advanced careers and secured research grants. The opening ceremony began with the traditional acknowledgement of superior intellect, where each delegation briefly recited their species' contributions to xenobiological understanding. The Vorthans had pioneered biomechanical integration studies, the Luminians had mapped quantum consciousness patterns in predatory species, the Gekanids had developed the Universal Aggression Index that formed the foundation of modern predator classification. When the ceremony reached the human delegation, the amphitheater fell into what could generously be called expectant silence. The Terran observer stood briefly, nodded to the assembly, and sat back down without speaking. Several attendees exchanged glances that conveyed volumes about primitive species and their inability to grasp proper academic protocol. Dr. Velnar took the podium with the confidence of someone whose research had been cited in over 400 peer-reviewed papers. His specialty was apex predator hierarchies, a field he had practically invented during his doctoral studies on Rigel 7. The topic was particularly relevant given recent expansions into previously unexplored sectors, where colonial vessels had encountered predatory species that defied existing classification models. The afternoon's keynote presentation promised to revolutionize understanding of galactic predator distribution patterns. Velnar had developed a comprehensive ranking system that accounted for environmental factors, evolutionary pressures, biomechanical advantages, and cognitive capabilities. His work had been endorsed by the Interspecies Council for Xenobiological Standards, and had already been incorporated into colonial safety protocols. The human observer had positioned herself where she could see both the main display and the speaker's podium, her primitive datapad balanced on her knee. She appeared to be taking notes, though what a Terran could possibly contribute to advanced xenobiological discourse remained an open question. Her homeworld's most dangerous predators were, according to preliminary surveys, large cats that had somehow managed to avoid extinction despite lacking any obvious evolutionary advantages. Professor Zekthara dimmed the amphitheater lighting as Velinar began loading his presentation files. The holographic displays flickered to life, showing complex taxonomic trees and classification matrices that represented decades of careful research. This was the moment when serious scientists separated themselves from mere enthusiasts, when theoretical frameworks met rigorous empirical analysis. The first slide appeared in the air above the audience. Galactic Predator Hierarchies, a comprehensive analysis of apex species distribution across known space. The subtitle read, Understanding Lethal Efficiency in Hostile Environments. Belnar smiled at his audience, that particular expression academics reserve for moments when they're absolutely certain they're about to educate someone. The human in the back row adjusted her position slightly, her pen poised over her datapad, ready to document whatever wisdom was about to be dispensed. What happened next would become the stuff of academic legend, though not for the reasons anyone present could have anticipated. Dr. Velner activated his presentation with the theatrical flair of someone who had rehearsed this moment in front of bathroom mirrors across 3 star systems. The holographic display erupted into a 3-dimensional model of known galactic predator distribution, complete with threat assessment overlays and mortality statistics that pulsed ominously in shades of red. "Colleagues," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone whose research grants could fund small planetary governments, "we gather today to witness the culmination of 15 years of comprehensive analysis. What you are about to see represents the most complete understanding of apex predatory hierarchies ever assembled." The Vorthan delegation clicked their approval, a sound like typewriters operated by enthusiastic insects. The Luminians pulsed in synchronized patterns that roughly translated to academic arousal. Even the stoic Nexari had adjusted their optical sensors to maximum resolution, not wanting to miss any nuance of what promised to be a career-defining presentation. The first classification appeared above their heads, the Voidstalkers of the Andromeda Spiral. Velner's hologram displayed creatures that looked like nightmares given physical form, their crystalline exoskeletons reflecting starlight as they drifted through vacuum. These apex predators could survive in hard space, feeding on cosmic radiation and the occasional unlucky starship crew. Classification level, Omega Alpha, Belinar announced with the satisfaction of a wine connoisseur describing a particularly good vintage. Environmental adaptability, absolute. Threat assessment, extinction level for most spacefaring civilizations. Note the biomechanical integration of their feeding appendages with quantum state manipulation organs, the audience murmured appreciatively. This was exactly the kind of sophisticated analysis they had come to expect from cutting-edge xenobiology. The human in the back row made a small notation on her primitive datapad, though what she could possibly understand about quantum biological integration remained questionable. Next came the thermal hunters of Proxima Centauri b, creatures that existed as living plasma and could phase through most conventional matter. Their hunting strategy involved materializing inside their prey's cardiovascular systems, a technique that had claimed 17 research vessels before proper containment protocols were developed. Classification level, Omega Beta, Velnar continued, warming to his subject like a professor who had finally found students worthy of his brilliance. Note the elegant simplicity of their predatory methodology. No complex social structures, no tool usage, merely perfect biological efficiency married to supernatural hunting instincts. Professor Zekthara nodded sagely from her position near the podium. Her own research on bioluminescent deathworms had contributed significantly to the theoretical framework Velner was presenting. The collaborative nature of galactic xenobiology was one of its most admirable features, assuming one ignored the backbiting, plagiarism, and occasional academic duels that characterized most professional interactions. The presentation continued with the Metal Eaters of Wolf 359, silicon-based organisms that consumed starship hulls like particularly crunchy snacks. Their digestive systems could break down molecular bonds in titanium steel alloys, making them the stuff of engineering nightmares. Several colonies had been abandoned after metal-eater infestations, their infrastructure consumed down to the bedrock. Classification level, Omega Gamma, Velnar announced. Environmental specialists with limited mobility but devastating local impact. Their reproductive cycle coincides with solar flare activity, creating predictable but unavoidable infestation patterns. The human observer shifted slightly in her seat, her pen moving across her datapad with mechanical precision. Whatever she was recording, it seemed to require significantly more notation than the other attendees were making. Perhaps primitive species needed more detailed explanations to grasp advanced concepts. As Velnar progressed through his hierarchy, a pattern emerged that filled the amphitheater with scholarly satisfaction. The galaxy's most dangerous predators were invariably exotic creatures adapted to extreme environments. They possessed supernatural abilities, impossible physiologies, or quantum mechanical properties that defied conventional understanding. This was predation elevated to an art form, evolution pushed to its absolute limits. The chronostalkers of Vega could manipulate local time streams, aging their prey to death in seconds. The probability spiders of Tau Ceti existed in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously, making them effectively impossible to avoid or kill. The dream feeders of Betelgeuse attacked through psychic projection, consuming their victims' consciousness while leaving their bodies intact. Each classification was accompanied by detailed mortality statistics, environmental analysis, and theoretical frameworks for understanding their predatory methodologies. This was science at its most rigorous, backed by empirical data and peer-reviewed analysis. The assembled xenobiologists were witnessing the formal codification of galactic predatory knowledge. What we observe throughout these classifications, Velnar said as he approached his presentation's climax, is a clear correlation between predatory efficiency and environmental extremes. The galaxy's apex predators invariably evolve in hostile conditions that push biological systems beyond conventional limitations. Vacuum adaptation, quantum manipulation, temporal distortion, these represent the pinnacle of predatory evolution. The human in the back row had stopped taking notes. Her primitive datapad rested on her knee as she watched the presentation with an expression that was difficult to interpret. Perhaps she was finally grasping the sophistication of proper galactic science, or perhaps her limited cognitive capacity had reached its processing threshold. Dr. Velnar activated his final slide. A comprehensive ranking matrix that positioned the galaxy's known apex predators in order of lethality, environmental adaptability, and evolutionary sophistication. At the top of the hierarchy sat creatures that existed as living concepts, beings of pure energy, and entities that could manipulate fundamental forces of physics. This classification system, he concluded with the satisfaction of someone who had just solved xenobiology, provides a comprehensive framework for understanding predatory hierarchies across known space. Note the absence of primitive biological forms in the upper classifications. Simple carbon-based organisms, regardless of local adaptations, cannot compete with species that have transcended conventional biological limitations. The applause that followed was the kind reserved for presentations that would reshape entire academic fields. Velnar had not merely catalogued galactic predators, he had revealed the underlying principles that governed predatory evolution throughout the cosmos. This was the sort of work that earned permanent research positions and invitations to exclusive conferences. During the applause, the human observer raised her hand. The applause died with awkward suddenness. 300 pairs of eyes turned toward the Terran observer sitting with her hand raised like a student who had misunderstood the venue's sophistication. Dr. Velnar blinked, his confidence wavering. Academic protocol demanded acknowledging questions from recognized delegates, though the human's presence existed in diplomatic courtesy rather than genuine scholarly participation. Yes, he managed, packing impressive condescension into a single syllable. The human stood with unremarkable grace. Thank you, Dr. Velnar. Fascinating presentation. I was wondering, where would tigers rank in your classification system? The silence was typically reserved for bathroom location inquiries during funeral eulogies. Several delegates exchanged glances, conveying polite confusion mixed with second-hand embarrassment. I'm sorry, but I'm not familiar with this tiger species. Velenar said with the patience of someone explaining quantum mechanics to houseplants. They're from Earth, the human replied matter-of-factly. Panthera tigris, large cats. I noticed they didn't appear in your hierarchy and was curious about their classification level. The Vorthan delegation's clicking intensified, conveying polite amusement. Large cats threatening anything in a galaxy with quantum predators struck them as charmingly naive. Ah, Velenar said, confidence returning. Conventional biological predators from your homeworld. While impressive by local standards, terrestrial fauna wouldn't register on our system. We're dealing with apex predators that transcend traditional biological limitations. The human nodded thoughtfully. Where would you draw the line? What's the minimum threshold? Velenar activated a supplementary hologram. Gamma Delta classification, reserved for species demonstrating supernatural hunting abilities. The phase cats of Rigel 4 can alter molecular density to pass through solid matter. How big are these phase cats? 2 meters, roughly 45 kilograms. Packed hunters? Solitary. Phase shifting makes coordination unnecessary. So a dog-sized solitary predator qualifies because it phases through matter? Precisely. The supernatural element elevates it beyond conventional biology. And tigers wouldn't qualify because they're regular biological predators? Exact. The human considered this. Around the amphitheater, delegates relaxed as the educational exchange proceeded as expected. What kind of benchmarks define conventional parameters? The human asked. Velenar was enjoying himself. Standard physics limitations. Physical strength, speed, cunning, but bound by environmental constraints. No hostile environment survival. Energy manipulation or dimensional transcendence. What benchmarks are we discussing? The face cats achieve 60 kilometers per hour maximum sprint. Bite force around 400 pounds per square inch. The human's pen stopped moving. 60 kilometers per hour? Approximately. Their advantage lies in phase shifting. 400 psi bite force? Correct. Modest by impressive species standards. The human set her datapad aside and looked directly at Velenar. Her voice carried a new quality that made delegates unconsciously shift. Dr. Velenar, I need to clarify something. An adult tiger sprints at 70 kilometers per hour. Bite force exceeds 1000 psi. They leap 9 meters horizontally, 3 vertically. They swim rivers and hunt in water. Night vision 6 times more effective than human eyesight. Hear frequencies we can't detect. Track prey by scent across kilometers. The amphitheater grew quiet. A tiger requires hunting territory up to 400 square kilometers, patrolled and defended against competitors. They're ambush predators, killing prey up to 1,000 kilograms, 20 times their body weight. They hunt alone, kill with single neck bites, successfully hunting everything from fish to elephants. Velenar's holographic display seemed less impressive. But here's what might interest this symposium most, the human continued. Tigers aren't even the most dangerous predators on Earth. The statement hung in the acoustically perfect air like a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. Dr. Velenar's mouth opened and closed with the mechanical precision of someone whose worldview was experiencing rapid decompression. Around the amphitheater, delegates shifted with the collective unease of academics, realizing their expertise might have some rather significant gaps. I'm sorry, Velenar managed, his voice carrying the strained quality of someone trying to maintain professional composure while their theories crumbled. Did you say tigers aren't your planet's most dangerous predators? The human consulted her datapad with the casual efficiency of someone reading a grocery list. Correct. Tigers are impressive, but they're actually relatively specialized. Earth has significantly more versatile predators. Professor Zekthara leaned forward, her ceremonial tendrils twitching with what could charitably be described as academic curiosity, or, less charitably, as impending panic. More versatile how, exactly? Well, take polar bears. They're roughly twice the size of tigers. Equally fast on land, excellent swimmers, and adapted for one of Earth's most hostile environments. Arctic conditions that would kill most Earth species within hours. They can detect prey scent from over 30 kilometers away and have been observed hunting successfully both on land and underwater. The Leminian delegation's color patterns had shifted to frequencies that roughly translated to deep concern. The Nexari representatives were frantically adjusting their optical sensors, as if better resolution might somehow make the information less disturbing. But polar bears are still relatively straightforward compared to something like a saltwater crocodile, the human continued with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing weather patterns. They've remained essentially unchanged for 200 million years because they achieve perfect predatory efficiency, bite force over 3000 psi, can hold their breath underwater for over an hour, capable of explosive bursts of speed both in water and on land. Dr. Vellner was frantically consulting his own databases, searching for some framework that could contain what he was hearing. These are all large predators, though. Surely there's some size limitation to terrestrial predation. Actually, some of Earth's most efficient predators are quite small. Army ants, for instance. Individual ants are tiny, but they hunt in coordinated swarms of up to 20 million individuals. They can strip the flesh from animals thousands of times their size within hours. No escape strategy works against them, except outrunning the entire swarm. The clicking from the Vorthan delegation had evolved into something resembling Morse code transmitted by panic-stricken insects. Their own species had evolved past individual physical predation precisely because coordinated hunting represented such an existential threat. Or consider the box jellyfish, the human said, turning to a new page on her datapad. Technically not a predator in the traditional sense, but their toxin can kill most Earth species within minutes. They're nearly transparent, making them almost impossible to detect, and they actively hunt rather than waiting passively for prey. The human paused, scanning her notes with the focused attention of someone ensuring accuracy. The amphitheater had achieved the kind of silence typically reserved for moments when everyone simultaneously realizes they've made a terrible mistake. But I think what might really interest this symposium is the predatory density of Earth's ecosystem. Tigers require 400 square kilometers of territory because Earth supports so many competing predators. We have aerial predators, aquatic predators, subterranean predators, arboreal predators, and terrestrial predators, all occupying the same geographic regions. She looked up from her datapad, making eye contact with Dr. Vellner. A single square kilometer of Earth's rainforest contains thousands of predatory species. Everything from microscopic hunters to apex predators, all competing for resources in the same ecosystem. Most planets in your database support maybe a dozen predatory species across their entire surface. The realization was beginning to dawn on the assembled academics like a sunrise no one wanted to see. If Earth's predatory density was that extreme, and if their supposedly primitive species possessed capabilities that exceeded many classified galactic threats, then what exactly had they been dealing with when they granted humans observer status? Dr. Vellner cleared his throat with the desperate authority of someone trying to regain control of a presentation that had escaped into the academic equivalent of a horror movie. Surely you're not suggesting that Earth represents some sort of extreme predatory environment? The human's expression carried the kind of patience typically reserved for explaining obvious concepts to small children. Dr. Vellner, humans evolved as persistence hunters on a planet where nearly everything was trying to kill us. We developed endurance running not for recreation, but because it was the only hunting strategy that worked in an ecosystem dominated by faster, stronger, more efficient predators. She gestured toward the holographic display still showing Vellner's classification system. Your Omega-level threats. They're impressive, but they're specialists. Void stalkers hunt in vacuum. Thermal hunters need plasma states. Chronostalkers require temporal manipulation. Earth's predators succeed through adaptation and versatility in the galaxy's most competitive ecosystem. The human stood, preparing to deliver what was clearly going to be her concluding statement. Humans aren't from a primitive backwater, Dr. Vellner. We're from a planet so hostile that we had to become smarter, more adaptable, and more persistent than everything trying to eat us. We didn't achieve interstellar travel despite our environment. She smiled, with a kind of expression that made several delegates unconsciously calculate the distance to the nearest exit. We achieved it because of our environment. The silence that followed was pregnant with the kind of implications that kept xenobiologists awake at night. Dr. Vellner's holographic display continued cycling through his carefully researched classifications, each exotic predator now seeming somehow less impressive in the context of what they had just learned about Earth's biological nightmare factory. Professor Zekthara was the first to find her voice. though it carried the slightly strangled quality of someone whose academic assumptions were experiencing systematic demolition. Surely you're not implying that human evolution was shaped by constant predatory pressure? The human tilted her head with the expression of someone considering how to explain water to a fish. Dr. Zekthara, human children learn to identify dangerous animals before they learn basic mathematics. Our fairy tales are filled with creatures that want to eat us. We developed agriculture not just for food security, but to create barriers between ourselves and the things that hunted us. She gestured toward the assembled delegates with casual inclusivity. Most species achieve sapience in relatively stable environments, then develop technology to expand beyond their home ecosystems. Humans developed technology specifically to survive in our own ecosystem. Our first tools weren't for exploration or communication, they were weapons. The Gekanid delegation had arranged themselves into what their species called a contemplation spiral, a formation typically reserved for processing information that challenged fundamental worldviews. The implications were stacking up like academic dominoes, each revelation triggering larger questions about human capabilities and intentions. Consider human recreational activities, the human continued, apparently unaware that she was systematically dismantling several millennia of xenobiological theory. We climb mountains for entertainment. We deliberately place ourselves in hostile environments that would kill most galactic species within hours, and we call it vacation. We have competitions to see who can survive longest in environments that actively try to kill participants. Dr. Velnar was rapidly taking notes, his earlier confidence replaced by the frantic scribbling of someone trying to document a paradigm shift in real time. What about human cooperation? Surely social development mitigated individual survival pressures. The human's laugh contained enough genuine amusement to make several delegates reconsider their seating arrangements. Human cooperation evolved specifically because individual survival was so difficult. We developed complex social structures, not despite the hostile environment, but because of it. Pack hunting, resource sharing, coordinated defense. These weren't cultural choices, they were evolutionary necessities. She paused, consulting her datapad again. Human military strategy is based on thousands of years of experience fighting opponents that were stronger, faster, and better equipped than we were. We learned to win through superior planning, better coordination, and absolute persistence. Our entire civilization is built on the principle that if you can't outfight something, you outsmart it, outlast it, or find its weakness and exploit it ruthlessly. The amphitheater was experiencing the kind of collective realization that typically preceded major revisions to academic textbooks. The humans' casual revelations were systematically recontextualizing everything they thought they knew about predatory evolution, survival strategies, and the relationship between environment and civilization. But surely, Professor Zekthara interjected with the desperate hope of someone trying to salvage at least some fragment of established theory, surely human technological development represents a departure from these primitive survival strategies. The human's expression carried the kind of patience typically reserved for explaining fire safety to particularly slow children. Dr. Zekthara, human space exploration technology is directly descended from our weapons programs. Our interstellar propulsion systems evolved from intercontinental ballistic missiles. Our life support systems were developed to help us survive in environments that actively try to kill us. She gestured toward the amphitheater's sophisticated life support systems with casual appreciation. This station represents remarkable engineering, but it's designed to support species in a controlled environment. Human spacecraft are designed to keep us alive while we deliberately travel to places that want to kill us because that's what we're used to. The symposium was witnessing something unprecedented in academic history, a complete species reassessment conducted through casual conversation. The human hadn't presented formal research or peer-reviewed analysis. He had simply answered questions about tigers and accidentally revealed that Earth represented something unprecedented in galactic civilization. A world so hostile that its sapient species had evolved not just to survive extreme predation, but to thrive in conditions that would qualify as hostile alien environments by most standards. Dr. Velnar made one final attempt to salvage his theoretical framework. But certainly human predators must have some limitations, some environmental constraints that prevent them from achieving the supernatural capabilities we've documented in other species. The human considered this with the thoughtful expression of someone genuinely trying to be helpful. Well, humans did develop one significant limitation compared to other Earth predators. We became persistence hunters rather than ambush predators, which means we're not as immediately dangerous as, say, a tiger or a crocodile. Several delegates exhaled with what might have been relief. On the other hand, the human continued with devastating casualness. Persistence hunting means we don't stop. Ever. A human hunter can track prey across continents and through multiple climate zones, pursuing the same target for days or weeks until it collapses from exhaustion. We're not the fastest or strongest predators on Earth, but we might be the most terrifying because we never give up. She glanced around the amphitheater with mild curiosity. Has anyone here ever been hunted by something that could track you across interstellar distances, never stopping, never losing your trail, just following until you made a mistake? The question hung in the air like a diplomatic crisis waiting to happen. The implications were stacking up with the inexorable logic of someone explaining why a apparently harmless species had somehow managed to achieve interstellar travel from what was now clearly revealed to be a planetary-scale predator training ground. The symposium's aftermath would generate academic papers for decades, most of them focusing on the urgent need to revise galactic threat assessment protocols. The human's presentation had accomplished something unprecedented in xenobiological circles. It had made an entire discipline realize they might need to go back to school. Dr. Velnar would spend the following months developing new classification frameworks that accounted for what he termed predatory density variables and adaptive efficiency metrics. His revised hierarchy placed Earth somewhere between extremely concerning and let's maybe keep an eye on these people. The human observer returned to Earth with observer status intact, having successfully convinced the galaxy's foremost predator experts that her species might be worth taking seriously. She had asked one simple question about tigers and accidentally revolutionized interspecies xenobiology, which, when you think about it, was a very human thing to do. End of story.